So, how? How the actual fuck are numbers, people? What do I even mean by that? And why is 7 non-binary? Why do numbers have gender at all? Why is 9 male, and why is 11, 12, and 17 female? Why is every number friends with 11, and why do numbers appear like this to me? Well, truth be told, I have synesthesia. In fact, that's what this video is about if you couldn't guess by now, but you probably couldn't. Synesthesia, to me anyways, is just a fascinating thing that I've known about for a while, and that I've had about knowing for like the longest time, at least until recently. Turns out numbers giving off a vibe is not normal. A lot of my friends have it as well, and in fact one of my siblings does too. Anyways, I'll go over what it is, the different types, there's a lot of them, mine specifically, how it works, and how I actually found out I have it at all. So, yeah, I suppose we should get into it, starting now. Alright, so before I explain literally anything else, what even is synesthesia? According to Wikipedia, it's a perceptual phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in a secondary sensory or cognitive pathway. But, what does that actually mean? Basically, two senses get linked with each other somehow in the brain, which can lead to things like letters having specific colors, or genders, or personalities. It can lead to perfect pitch, and yes, that is synesthesia. I'll get into more of that later. It can lead to a taste in your mouth when you hear a word. It can lead to people giving off colored aura in some people. Things such as that, and many, many more. With that out of the way, I'll cover the most common types, because some of them surprised me when I heard about them. Also, there's two ways synesthesia can manifest. One is called associative synesthesia, where you don't actually physically see the association. Like, the color A isn't physically red to people who associate colors with symbols. It's just that they see color and think, this looks red. This gives me the perception of red, if that makes sense. Two is called projective synesthesia, where the thing being triggered by synesthesia only shows up when you're actually stimulated in your vision, like it's physically there. This could be stunning, like seeing the color red in your vision when you read the letter A or something like that. Anyways, with that explanation out of the way, here's what the most common types of synesthesia are. Alright, so starting with grapheme color synesthesia, also known as the one where numbers and letters have colors assigned to them. This is the one that the majority of people with synesthesia, aka synesthetes, have. You know how I described people seeing a number or letter and perceiving a color like 30 seconds ago? That's what this one is. There's actually an entire synesthesia category called color sequence synesthesia that this falls under. And by the way, this synesthesia specifically is the most common one in synesthetes. About 50% of them have it. Sound color synesthesia, also known as sound chromesthesia. This one is probably the one you hear the most about when thinking about synesthesia, just because of how interesting it is to people who don't actually have synesthesia at all. How this one presents is that you can hear a sound and you perceive it as a color, like you have a perceival of color, basically. It can be literally any color, by the way. In the case of this person from my Discord server, this is their notes with their colors. And no, these exact colors won't show up for anyone else with this type of synesthesia. In fact, everybody's synesthesia experience is personalized to themselves. So my synesthesia is different from my brother's synesthesia, which is different than this person's synesthesia, and so on. Now that's already fairly cool, I would say, but remember how I mentioned projective synesthesia? Yeah, so if you manage to have that with this type of synesthesia, you can experience things like this in your vision when you're listening to music. As another example, someone on r/synesthesia described their projective chromesthesia like this. So, yeah, that's pretty fire. On another note, some people with this type of synesthesia actually use it to make artwork out of what they see or perceive when listening to music, such as this. I don't know about you, but this looks pretty fire to me. As another thing, these people also typically have perfect pitch, given that the associations between the color and the note it gives off is 100% consistent every single time, allowing them to pick out a note by simply hearing it as it gives off that perception of color to them. Aura, also known as projective personality to color. Yes, this is legitimately a thing, which actually surprised me when I first heard of it. Basically, what occurs is you get a vibe from somebody, and they give off this colored aura type perceival in your vision, or the perception of a color. Like, let's say the color you perceive when looking at a thing that you like is green. By association, if you like somebody, that person will give off the perception of a green, or potentially have some type of glow or some other thing around them in that kind of color. It's super cool, actually, but also can be very, very overstimulating. Now, because I don't have this one, this is an example of what somebody said about theirs. Ordinal linguistic personification. Alright, so this is a weird one, and I actually have this one too. I'll get into it more later. Have numbers and letters ever given off some vibe or personality to you? I'm guessing the answer to that is no, they probably don't. However, to people with this type of synesthesia, they actually do. And I'm not talking about basic things like their gender either. Numbers and letters can literally have full-fledged personalities of likes, dislikes, be in relationships, give off their own color based on vibes, be described as actual people with their own name, and many, many more things. This means numbers can, quite literally, have actual personalities. I'll get more into that starting now. Yes, that section name is literally real. Numbers to me, literally have personalities. Letters too, but to far less of an extent. So anything I mention in this section will also apply to letters too, just to a lesser extent. This section will be about my experience with ordinal linguistic personification personally, along with spatial sequence synesthesia, and the vibes numbers give off. Just to get it over with, I'll discuss spatial sequence synesthesia first. Alright, so this one is somewhat interesting because in my mind, I visualize numbers like this. As I later found out, the way numbers are structured here, such as 27, 28, and 29 being under other numbers like this, or 54 being disconnected from 53 and 55, or 40 being close to 96, literally ties into my ordinal linguistic personification, also known as OLP, which is what I will refer to it from now on. Oh, also, a lot of numbers are simply just missing, mostly because of the fact that they kind of just suck relative to the other numbers. Like, take 30 for example. 30 sucks, gives off a bad vibe, and is a ridiculously masculine guy. Just, ugh, I don't vibe with it at all. I hate him. I'm unsure why 26 isn't there, given that they're non-binary and should be between 25 and 27, but it just doesn't really fit. Neither does 28, at least in a line, and 30, 32, 33, 36, 38, and a bunch of others that just don't fit in at all. Anyways, do you see all these things that I've labeled here? Those are clusters of numbers my brain associates with each other as they look similar enough to where my brain made some broad categorization. And then that's where the real fun started. I know that this only goes to 200, but I was just too lazy to go further, but you can already make out some patterns and associations that I apparently make. So as you can see, 140 through 159 are close enough to where my brain bothered to label a cluster after them. Same with 27 through 29 and a bunch of other things, including 40 being with 96. More on that later. Then there's things that don't even actually make sense to me consciously, like it looping and having 39, 62, 64, and 44, or whatever, being so close together and all that, but somehow they still make sense to my brain, it just feels right, I guess. There's also things like the 70s all being slightly drawn out like a string here, then it drops into the hundreds, so this bit between 80 and 110 is slightly fluid. Then there's another loop around 131, which circles back to 177, which I'm fairly convinced is just because the numbers are friends with each other or something like that. I do not know. Now, right when I thought I finished the image, I then took a look at 130, then at 180, and thought, those two numbers belong together. Oh my god. And then I did the same for other numbers in the 20s and 70s. Oh yeah, you might want to know what that's about. So remember how I mentioned something called ordinal linguistic personification earlier? You know, numbers, letters, words, giving off vibes, having personalities and genders and things? You know, I have that, like I mentioned earlier, and while to me it seems very boring because, like, it's just a thing I live with, I think it'll be fairly interesting to you guys. So here's how it works. Numbers, to me, are people, somewhat, if that makes any sense. They're not actually people, but in my mind they're connected to being people, but yeah. And 11 is a girl, like the chapter card thing you said. So actually, as an example, why not just take 11, because it's already mentioned anyway. So obviously 11 is a girl. Now what you probably didn't know is that 11 is close to other numbers as well in terms of a these two look good together kind of thing, as in it's friends with a lot of them. From 1 to 20, it's close to 4, 7, 10, 11, 12, 14, 17, and it's sort of close or acquainted with 20. And every number has this property, and I mean all of them, consistently, 100% of the time, without fail. If you tell me a number, I can tell you who it's friends with or acquaintances are, even if I've never interacted with that number before. It's kind of crazy, actually, how strong this association is to me. Now, this also means numbers can have dislikes as well. For example, 11 doesn't like 89. From what I'm aware, I don't believe any numbers outright hate other numbers because they gotta interact with each other somehow, and they'll be forced to at some point down the line anyway. Oh, by the way, if you thought that was insane enough, 27 through 29 are literally in a lesbian relationship in my head for some reason, due to 27 being a girl, and 28 and 29 being non-binary and just vibing together. The numbers just fit so well for some reason, and I can't really explain it. 63 and 38 are super close friends too, for some reason. I don't know. Also, so are 7 and 11, but they're more just besties than in actually any relationship kind of deal. I would think of more examples, but I genuinely don't think I've interacted with other numbers enough to the point where they would just give off that vibe together. At least yet. Speaking of numbers being friends, by the way, here's all the numbers 1 through 20 and who they're close to. The colored arrows represent who each number is super close to, friends with, and the gray one represents acquaintances. This is all of them separately. By the way, that isn't the only thing I have. Numbers also give off a vibe from bad to good, which is what I actually referenced in this video well over a year before I even knew I had synesthesia, where I said this. Apart from that, I don't really have a favorite number, but I do have a pattern to it, where I like numbers that are more spiky, so stuff with like 1, 7, 4, things like that, and also powers of 2 are actually pretty good as well. Those are not quite as good as 174. There's also numbers like 151 and 171 that I think are really good. As it turns out, this good or bad vibe can literally impact how nice two numbers seem next to each other. Like, no joke, if there is a good number next to a really shitty one, I will actually internally get pissed off. I have no idea why I do this. As an example, here's 11 and 90. To me, these numbers fucking suck together. In fact, if you combine it into 1190, the entirety of the number is worse due to the 90 at the end of it. As another example, 7 and 83. This one isn't particularly bad because 7 saves the vibe somehow, but if you combine it into 783, the 83 makes the number look worse and it pisses me off. I'm not even sure why. Also, this vibe is literally tied to the gender itself. It seems that more masculine or manly numbers piss me off, while more feminine or girly numbers don't. Super strange. So that's cool. What else is there? Well, all of what I'm describing actually means there's a 3-layer deep association between numbers and gender, and this is it. Numbers have a shape, it's actually 80% that and 20% the sound of number, but we can ignore that, which then gives off a vibe, and then that vibe gets converted to a color in my head or something, and that somehow magically results in this. This is all the numbers 0 to 100 plotted according to their gender. Blue is masculine, obviously, and pink is feminine, with purple being non-binary or somewhere in the middle. The ones connected with gray lines are gender fluid, by the way, with the first instance of which being 14 for some reason. I'm not even sure why 14 is gender fluid, actually, but whatever, we can just ignore that. It just is. Anyways, you can see some kind of relationship here, I'm assuming. If you can't, here it is. Rounder numbers get interpreted by me as more masculine, while spikier ones get interpreted by me as feminine, except 67. 67 is kind of just chilling in the middle doing its own thing, I suppose. 61 as well. As another thing, 100 somehow ended up being bi gender, which is why it's doing whatever the fuck it is here. For another comparison, here's all the numbers 1 to 100. The font is different, so it'll be slightly different in terms of the gender and vibe, but you get the idea. Now, all of this sounds pretty fascinating, doesn't it? Well, if it did, the next thing I'm about to show off is the most ridiculous thing I did not expect to come out of this. And that something is mental math. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tristan, how the fuck is mental math affected by this? Okay, fine. I'll tell you. So remember how numbers give off vibes and numbers that don't belong together piss me off? So as I found out, it's not only just an emotional response. Basically, any math problems involving numbers I don't like get solved slower in my head when I do mental math, yet when it involves numbers I do like, they get solved much faster. Like 3 times faster almost. Let me take you through an example of how this works, because I think that might help a little bit here. So, 40 minus 22.85. I know this seems random, but this is based on how much change I actually gave somebody at work the other day, and the numbers work out nicely, so there's that. Okay, anyways. So, in my head, it's effectively like, so 40 minus 0.85 is 39.15, and that minus 22 is 17.15. Except I effectively skip the intermediate step and just know the answer instantly. And this answer, to me, makes sense, because 40 and 22 are acquaintances, 40 and 85 are as well, 22 and 17 are essentially besties, 22 and 15 are friends, 17 and 15, along with 17 and 40 and 15 and 40 are friends as well. So in my mind, because of that, it makes sense right off the bat without actually thinking about it. This is good because the synesthesia automatically confirms the logical calculation I'm going through in my head, effectively bypassing having to actually do any logical calculation after I do it, just because it feels right to my brain. Now let's say we do 88 minus 44. This is where problems begin, because at first my synesthesia is like, this makes no sense, so it genuinely makes me confused even though I know the answer has to be 44. So I essentially go through the same steps as I did with 40 minus 22.85 slower, because of the fact that I have essentially bypassed my synesthesia and logic the math in my head, while also being confused by the synesthesia. By the way, if you're wondering what answer 88 minus 44 supposedly is for my synesthesia, it doesn't actually exist, even though I logically know for a fact it's 44. By the way, 88 and 44 don't like each other much, and neither do 8 and 4, or 88 and 4, or 8 and 44. What that results in is this conflict between the synesthesia and the logical calculation, as, like I said before, the synesthesia goes against what logical calculation is saying is correct, effectively causing me to purely logically calculate the math more than once to confirm it, all because it quote-unquote doesn't feel right. I swear, I fucking hate my brain sometimes. Now, there was one other unexpected effect with all of this too. The other day, somebody on my Discord server asked me what 5 plus 5 was as some random extension to a joke or something. And you want to know what the first thing that came to my mind was? It thought it was 12. Not 10, 12. You want to know why? Because in my mind, 5 and 12 are friends with each other, so my mind was like, alright, clearly this makes sense because my synesthesia said so. No, I am not joking. Then I had to actually calculate it, and it's obviously 10 that way. It just makes sense for me because 5 and 12 are friends, I suppose. Meanwhile, 5 and 10 are acquaintances at best, so it just feels wrong. It's also the same reason why 14 plus 14 was 27 in my mind for the longest time, I think. I think it just felt that it made sense because 14 plus 14 being 28 does not feel right at all, if you get what I mean. So yeah, that's how my synesthesia presents itself. Yes, this section was 11 minutes long. No, I really do not care. And now for the last section, how I even discovered I had synesthesia at all. It first started when I was fucking around with a Discord call, and I was like, okay, I'm going to show how I visualize time, and then this came out of it because it just looked right. And then I posted an r/synesthesia about it, because I thought it might have been a type of synesthesia, and some dude responded with this. A few days later, I extended it to this. Also, don't mind if Fibonacci sequence stuff or Pascal's triangle that isn't included in synesthesia. And then the real fun started, because of course it did. Remember this image from earlier? That's when I extended it from 120 or so to 200, and the blending of the numbers began, as they're close enough to be like that in my mind, I guess. 3 days later, I found that numbers can literally have relationships with each other, such as 11 liking 14 and 17 and 20, for example. You already know this. And that's also where 27 through 29 being in a lesbian relationship comes from. And finally, 6 days later, I realized numbers have genders in my head, and it all simply spiraled from there. Honestly, the OLP beyond number vibes might be more associative than anything, but it is entirely consistent, so it does meet the requirement for it to be synesthesia anyway. But yeah, that's how I discovered it. Now what's really interesting isn't exactly that, because there's one more thing I would like to bring up. Did anyone else write books when they were a kid? Because I did. Well over 30 of them, in fact. A good chunk of them involved numbers as the characters, and I feel like that was a massive sign beforehand that I had synesthesia. Like, the numbers had full-on personalities and things like that from what I can recall. Just no gender shit, because I just didn't have a concept of it. So even back then, numbers were personified in my mind. Maybe it was because I interacted with them so much as a kid, I was like 4, that they became synonymous with like actual people in my mind somewhat. I'm not sure. It's still cool nonetheless though. So that's how my synesthesia presents itself, along with some types that you may have if you weren't aware of them. Yeah, it's very complex as you can see, and it actually is more complex than what I've shown here, but it would take well over an hour to explain it all if I did that. And besides, the script is already 3,410 words long, and I've given myself enough editing work to do. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two about this thing that, in all honesty, most people probably have, even if it's really minor. Like, you can have just the number 5 be pink, and that counts as synesthesia. And hell, you might have discovered that you have synesthesia yourself during this video or something like that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and now here's some comments from my post about synesthesia that I thought were interesting enough to include. I hope you enjoyed the comments. 25 is a caring parent and 31 is an alcoholic. Schizophrenia or synesthesia? 50-50. I can hear images. Happy face. Yeah, you know, that's pretty basic actually. This is very threatening to look at and I don't know why. Oh cool, you finally put an accurate, correct representation of my handwriting on a piece of paper. These pieces of paper probably feel violated. Number line if it was awesome. 7 is also Z. No, it isn't. 7 is non-binary or a girl. 37.1043 is a boy. No, it isn't. I don't want just gender. Give me attributes. Is 7 struggling? No, I can say for a fact that 7 is not struggling, actually. 7 is evil. I hate 7 for what it did to me in kindergarten. It's all 7's fault. Number 8 is a girl, and 11 is best friends of 10. No, it is not a girl, but 11 is indeed best friends of 10. She's also best friends with 12. Yeah, there's that. My favorite number is 17. How did you know? What do you feel about 54? To be fair, it's kind of non-binary leading girl. And yes, that is my actual opinion on 54. They're pretty fire. Numbers can be gay? Yes. At Tristangent. Okay. Anyways, I just wanted to get in here and say thank you to my tier 11. It's actually 3 members. Laureano Alcina and Dear Blainates. I think that's how you pronounce it. So thank you guys for supporting my channel on top of the tier 1 members as well. So yeah, see you in the next video. Also, I am sick. That's why my voice sounds like complete shit right now. How fun.